Hello, my loves, and welcome back to my channel. It's Shar, but of course, you already know that. In today's video, I am building, I would claim, my first ever apartment block, but perhaps the first ever apartment block that I actually finished, because of course, next week we are getting for rent in The Sims 4, which I'm very excited about just because I feel like that's going to add so many more Sims to my save file, and I feel like apartments are very realistic, mostly because housing. Can't afford a house, but also because I grew up in New York City. I've always grown up in big cities and lived in big cities. So to me, apartments feel like very normal. And the fact that we only have apartments in Eco Lifestyle, that World Evergreen Harbor, and in city living in San Myshuno, I'm really happy that we're able to now build our own apartment blocks. Although I did say this in a previous video, and that I thought that with the different lots, quote unquote, on the same lot, that there would be a loading screen between the apartments, and I am absolutely right about that because the Simmers have early access to the new gameplay pack. So yes, there are loading screens between each lot. I fully understand why they do that because if you can have up to 100 apartments on a single lot with cheats on, if all 100 of those apartments were loaded, like even the most high end of computers would really struggle to load that. Although I wish there was this thing that instead of a loading screen, maybe your sim just knocked on the door and only then would the lot actually load in. But realistically, I do like the idea that you can't see into the other apartments because that's how it works. I can't visually see into someone else's apartment unless I'm let in there. So I really like that. And for this apartment building, I decided to go for a new build. Now, I have lived in a new build before, and I've seen a lot of them. We have all, at some point or other, seen a new build or a picture of a new build. They're very generic, very quote-unquote luxury buildings, essentially trying to have mass appeal. So for this apartment building, instead of adding a shit ton of personality via the actual build items, I kept it very neutral. There's gray floors, there's concrete ceilings, there's white plaster walls, and that is pretty much it. And I think in total in this unit, I have 2 apartments on the first floor, and then I have 1 apartment on the second floor, which is 2 bedrooms, and then I have the penthouse on the 3rd floor. So there aren't a ton of apartments in here, but what I'm really excited to see with the Sims 4 for rent pack, that's a very awkward name, is roommates and having that work. And I'm so excited to play with Harley specifically and with Lake in Whimsy Stories. Harley is my sim from my Family Dynamics Let's Play. She was my first ever infant in my Growing Together LP. I absolutely adore Harley, and I feel like she could very easily live in one of these apartments when she graduates from college, which she will be doing in the next part. So timing wise, this will be really perfect. And even though I don't have access to For Rent right now, I am very excited to get my hands on it. And I know that the Sims team has said it's very easy for you to convert your existing builds into apartments because it doesn't have to be apartments. It could be townhouses. You could be renting a room in your house. You could have a basement suite. You could have an in-law suite. It's essentially you can section off any part of your lot and say this is a rental unit. And I'm very excited for that. Now, typically I add personality into my Sims apartments or my Sims homes or my Sims builds just because I like to tell a story via the objects that I put down. And I think that I did so for each apartment in this building, some more so than others. So for this penthouse suite, I imagine that it's 2 women who live in this suite, one who's like a very high-powered investor of sorts, and the other one who's like a graphic designer, also very high-powered. But one is like super artsy and into plants and just like very hippie is what I want to say. Just picture that person. And the other one is more like traditional, calm personality. And then for the downstairs apartment, I have like a gamer apartment. And then I have just like a very calm room, if that makes sense. Very wood tone, something that you would associate with being homey. And then the downstairs, the first floor, are the only apartments that are smaller. I have a 1-bedroom apartment, and then I have a studio. Of all of the apartments you're going to see, I absolutely love how the studio turns out. I think it is so peaceful, and I'm happy with what I was able to do with it within the game. Now, I do rotate a shit ton throughout this video. I was looking at this apartment from every single angle. I would go down and see what the sim would see, make sure that everything was cohesive, that it was working the way that I personally wanted it to work for these apartments. So I cut a lot of the turning out in this video, but you will still see some turning because I was being very meticulous with the interior of the apartments. And as I mentioned, I would love to say this is my first apartment build, but it is not. There are several videos where I've attempted this before and you have not seen them. One where I was building a quote-unquote neighborhood in a single lot where it's essentially multiple homes with communal spaces, communal park, so turning a really big lot into a neighborhood of its own, which I want to rethink because I think that the lot that I chose was too small for what I want it to do. And I think I genuinely need like a 50 by 50 lot if I want to do one of those neighborhoods. But I really do love the idea of dividing up these massive lots into smaller spaces. One, because I don't like building massive builds, but two, because it's going to allow me to incorporate more Sims and therefore more storytelling and more community-like lots while also having them be residential. Because as I mentioned with the neighborhood, right, I could build a neighborhood and it would have multiple houses, but within that neighborhood, I could also have communal spaces like a recreational lot. Of course, I couldn't actually tag it as a recreational lot, but the Sims could use it. It could still have a gym, a pool, a library, maybe some kind of crafts room. That could still be possible and it would still function the way that I would want it to function. The only thing I couldn't have is a retail store or like a restaurant or a cafe that's also residential. And I wish that they would add that in the future because I don't know if this is my skew and perspective, just because as I've mentioned, I've lived in big cities my entire life. For me, it is more common to see an apartment building that has like a storefront at the bottom of the apartment building. So it's not the same building, but for me, that's what I constantly see. So I would love to have that. And even when I was in Philadelphia, I would see apartment buildings all the time that would have their own cafes or like little coffee shop areas that were attached to the building. And I would love to do that and have it be like an ultra luxury apartment, but that's not currently possible in The Sims 4. And for now, that is completely fine. Now, a lot of this build was me doing copying and pasting. I wanted to show you a little bit of that with the builds in the bathrooms, but I cut a lot of it out because it really is just me copying and pasting across the board because they are apartments and they're presumably owned by the same company. So all of the fixtures are the same. The bathrooms have the same appliances is not right. Have the same fixtures. The kitchens have the same fixtures. It's just in different color variations, different swatches to appeal to different kind of people, but they're ultimately the same items. And that's what I went for. I think of all of the kitchens that I built, I really loved the penthouse kitchen just because I can imagine like cooking and hosting up there. And I think it is so cozy and comfortable. I wish the fridges matched with the stoves that I chose, but I ultimately felt like I wanted that specific fridge and I liked well enough how the stove looked with it because I didn't want to use the Home Chef Hustle stove. Anyway, besties, this is what it turned out. I also really like the blue kitchen in this apartment that I'm completing, which is the 2-bedroom, and I just think it's very cute. Now, in my mind, all of the Sims who live here are like in their 20s and early 30s, as it typically, not to generalize, but like typically in my experience when I lived in one of these type of buildings, it was a lot of people in their 20s and in their early 30s. So that's exactly who I pictured living in this apartment. And outside of that, I guess I want to give you some life updates. I don't know if I actually have life updates. I really actually don't. So with the 4 rent pack, I was also seeing that there's a couple of glitches. One of the main one that I've seen is how difficult and laggy it is to apply wallpapers, which I saw on Plumbella's channel, which let me tell you lit a fire under my behind to come in here and to finish this apartment before hopefully I never encounter that. But if I did, it would really hinder my desire to want to build. And I was actually looking at this building as I was, of course, editing it, chopping out the pieces that were me just scrolling endlessly through a catalog or me taking pauses or breaks. I think that this apartment is the apartment that Harley would live in, largely because this big bedroom here has a gamer space. And I think that subconsciously I was infusing Harley into this build. So I'm very excited to move her in. I will be back with Harley in a second. But for me, I find that there's always things that I want to do in the background. And until I do those things, I don't want to record the next part. So for me and Harley's save file in my Family Dynamics Let's Play, Harley is a lesbian. And for me, there aren't enough women in the world. I'm like, I need to incorporate many love interests for Harley. So then I have to create a sim for a bunch of sims. And because I am currently recording a bunch of videos for my other channel, I just have not prioritized that. But December should be a slow month for me in terms of my full-time 9 to 5 job, and that I'm gonna have a little bit more free time to actually work on these things, which I am very excited for. I had so many things that I want to talk to you all about before I started recording this video, and honestly, my mind has gone blank. I can tell you that it was recently Black Friday, which I typically don't do a lot of shopping on Black Friday, and this year I did do a bit of shopping on Black Friday, largely because I've had this thing where I have so many clothes. But a lot of the clothes that I have are cute, but I don't personally love how it looks on me. And one of the mindsets I'm adapting for the end of this year and for 2024 is that just because something fits doesn't mean that it is for me and that it's something that I have to personally keep. Of course, I recognize that there is some level of privilege in that statement, but as someone who is in a bigger body, I think I want to shake the mindset that I'm not allowed to have like a personal sense of style and really embrace that my clothes should make me feel like the most confident version of myself. So I did some shopping at Hollister and then I completely decluttered my wardrobe, which this is not a sponsorship in any way whatsoever. But if you ever do declutter your wardrobe and you're thinking, well, what exactly do I do with all of these clothes? Especially if, like me, you live in an area where you don't have a car and you don't drive, and trying to physically take your clothes elsewhere would require multiple trips. ThreadUp actually does have a clothes donation service where they will send you a box and a shipping label, and you can just throw all of your clothes in there and send it to them, and they will either sell them or they will like sustainably I want to say get rid of them. You know what I mean when I say that. They're not like throwing it in the trash. They're finding ways to sustainably make sure that these clothes go where they need to go, which I personally really love. It takes a lot of the work out for me because I can just put all of that stuff in a box and take one trip to the post office and say, here you go. Here are all of my clothes. I haven't officially gotten to that point because I've really just moved a lot of the clothes into a different closet within my home into like storage because I don't have the mental capacity to sort through them right now. What I did was I cleared out, this is a boring conversation for you all, but hello, it's my channel. I get to say whatever I want and talk about what's actually on my mind. So I didn't want to do that because all I did with my clothes was that things that I was not reaching for, things that I do not constantly wear, I just put aside. I said, nope. And I only filled my closet with things that I really love. And I have to tell you, I find it so soothing to have my wardrobe organized to be only the pieces that I truly love and wear all the time. And also it inspires me to want to get dressed more often and to actually put effort into what it is that I'm wearing. Not in that I'm like accessorizing, styling a million different pieces, because I don't always do that, but in that it makes me think about like, well, what would I actually wear with this? I say to you as I'm recording in my Christmas pajamas. But hopefully we're coming to the end of this video. I do find myself running out of things to say. I don't know why my mind is so blank this morning, but it is. I have been reading. I am doing a challenge this month where I am reading 30 books in 30 days, which, yes, is absolutely wild, but has already been so much fun. I just recently finished Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I absolutely loved. It is such a cozy, like romantic fantasy. If you love like adventure stories and journey stories, and you love things like the Veronica Speedwell series or Margaret Rogerson, I think that you would really, or even The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughters, that series by Theodora Goss, I think that you would really like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia for Fairies. Now for this build, I tried so hard to make this kitchen work because of course it's the studio apartment, and just with how the door is positioned, I had to be creative, and I realized I wouldn't be able to fit a stove if I did the big tall cabinet. So I ultimately got rid of that tall cabinet. And here you see I went with very soothing a color palette, lots of light wood tones and sage greens and like creamy whites, which I just think this apartment is so nice to walk into, and it is so much more spacious than I thought it would be. I worried this apartment would be really awkward and small, but I think that how I've laid it out feels realistic to how I've seen other studio apartments laid out, and I've lived in studio apartments before, and this is really similar somewhat to how I would lay out my studio apartments. And we still have separate living spaces and some amount of privacy for the bedroom. I just couldn't actually place a wall around the bedroom because it would make it feel too small and claustrophobic. I felt like it was just not big enough. So then we move on to the apartment next door, the only one bedroom in the entire building, which I wanted to do like this super colorful built-in bookshelf. Here we have a person who loves to entertain, to throw parties, has a big friend group, is very loud. Say hello to your obnoxious neighbor. Although I don't think they're an obnoxious person. Perhaps they're just not very self-aware. But I went for a very colorful, almost kind of bohemian style for this apartment, with the bedroom kind of having its own separate feeling and vibe of its own. For the bedroom, I wanted calming, seaside feeling. And for the living room and the kitchen and even the dining room, which, let me tell you, I was shocked I was able to fit in, but I'm glad that I did. Otherwise, we would have had that huge amount of dead space in the entryway, which, to be fair, if you have an apartment that's fairly spacious, it's not uncommon for you to have a ton of empty room. You don't always fill up every square inch of empty floor space with something, and I don't think you always should do that. But in The Sims 4, it just looks awkward to have a big empty spaces, so I did fill that up. And then I'm just going in now at the end of the video, and I'm adding some like little personal touches to infuse some personality. Yes, there are a lot of objects on this lot, but with how they've created the 4 rent pack, I don't think that there will be any issues with that, because they are officially considering apartments that you build or like separate lots that you have within your lot as something different. So your computer isn't trying to load up every item on the lot. And my computer handled it just well, but of course, full transparency, I have a gaming PC. My computer is fairly powerful and can handle quite a lot. So that pretty much is the end of this video. There are a few more pieces of footage where you're just seeing me add some decor bits to the house. Let me know which one is your personal favorite. As I mentioned, I love the studio, but I also really love the penthouse. And I am going to try to do the neighborhood thing again, and I'm going to record a video on that and have that be something that you all can watch to see how I do this. And I've said this before, but the reason I do these videos and I build out my own save file is because I want to get practice at building. I want to get better at it. And you can't get better at something that you don't practice and you don't do. So while I don't think I'm an exceptional builder, there are definitely builds that I'm proud of. And this is one of them. Now, something that I always struggle with builds is like window placements on the sides of the buildings. But as I've been just like walking through life, you know, looking at buildings and houses, the sides are usually ugly. I hate to break it to you, but they are. The sides of the house and the backs of the house, window placements do not matter. They're thinking about functionality and which window placements make sense for the room that it's in the home. The front of the house is always the prettiest, or the front of the apartment is always the prettiest, because curb appeal. That is what's going on. So my mindset now with my build is I also don't really care what the sides and the back of the house necessarily look like, because I want window placements that make sense for the room that they are in. But I had so much fun building this. I have this little undercover area that you see on the ground floor, which is something that's inspired by a building that I saw in London. When I was there last holiday season, I was going to this little cafe, this bakery, and it was like a bakery, and like they had this courtyard, and in this courtyard was an apartment building, and then they had their own like little undercover space where you could chill and hang out. And I feel like I've seen those around quite a bit, so I wanted to have that. Now, the only thing is, I felt this apartment building on this lot would look really weird with a gated entrance. Don't know why, just did not personally like this. So yes, technically any sim who is out and about just walking through the world will just walk in, and they can in fact just use these things. But I do like how that little undercover area works. I kind of picture it as this space where you're coming home from work or from some kind of event, or maybe you have some friends over and you don't want to go upstairs. You're hanging out downstairs, you're watching a little bit of TV, sitting on some of the lounge chairs, admiring the waterfall, which those like white things that you see sectioning off the little downstairs quote unquote lounge area are functional waterfalls. They will work in live mode. Then I have the little just kind of community space out back, which I will move that barbecue, but has a barbecue, a really big swimming pool, a bar, and is genuinely just supposed to be an entertainment area. I wish it was a little bit bigger so I could add things like a picnic area, an official dining area, but it does not, and that's fine. And while in my mind, I do consider this to be a new build and perhaps leaning on the luxury side of new build, rent for sure is high in this apartment building. It's not the highest that it could be. If I really wanted to go full luxury for this apartment building and I wanted to have rent be at astronomical rates for this apartment building, I would add things like a gym, a community like lounge space, an official one, which usually has things like pool tables and flat screen TVs and coffee making stations and its own little library. I would have a gym if I haven't already mentioned that. And I saw one apartment in Philly where there was actually a grocery store underneath the apartment building, and I think the residents who lived there got a certain amount of discount in that store for living in the apartment building. So perhaps a concept like this. Something else I'm really excited to build beyond the neighborhoods and apartment complexes is townhouses. I already have townhouses in Newcrest that I attempted to build, but I'm going to bulldoze them and scale it down. I think there's too many townhouses in the lot, and there's nothing wrong with having bigger townhouses, maybe having 3 townhouses instead of 4. And I'm also really excited to build dorms and just have different ideas for different dorms in different sections. I wish there's something that we could do was like build our own universities and build our own high schools. I would love that because I could picture Newcrest being like a college town, but in my mind, Newcrest is a very like quote unquote up and coming. I don't like that phrasing, but it's new build. It's a bunch of really new apartment buildings and new houses that are popping up. And I put this specific apartment complex in the strip of what I always convert into shops and like community spaces because I picture this as downtown. I'm using air quotes here. Downtown Newcrest, which is where I decided to put this modern apartment building because that's usually where they are. It's somewhere downtown. I don't think I have anything else to update you on except that I am working on an apartment building as well. That is an older apartment building, which is inspired by one of the apartment buildings that I lived in Philly, but also the kind of apartment buildings that my friends lived in when I was living in Philly as well. So something a little bit older, a little bit dated. Now, the issue with that apartment building, which you will see that I'm having, is that I was a little bit too ambitious. I wanted it to feel older. I wanted it to feel small, but some of the apartments are a little bit too small, which to be fair, those kind of apartments do exist. So it just comes down to how I want to decorate them. But I will be taking a break from building these kind of massive lots just because they take up so much time. Like for reference, building this one took me something like 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours to build. But I am now going to show you the tour of the apartment complex, which is something that I don't usually do. So as you saw, that is the ground floor. And then we have the hallway. And of course, this long hallway and corridor stairwell is how you get into all of the apartments. So the first one leads up to the actual second floor, but the first floor of a livable apartment where we have the 1 bedroom and then we have the studio space. You can get the sense of the color scheme and what I was going for. And then with the studio, you've seen it. I added a window into the space just because it needed a window. The only windows are that back wall with access to the private balcony. And I just love the color combination in this one. And then if we go upstairs, we have the 2-bedroom apartment, which I will show you in a minute. Just want to make sure you get the full scope. Like I said, this sim likes to host, so their balcony is very party forward, which means their house is very loud. But then we have the second apartment upstairs, which is the first of the 2-bedroom apartments. We open up into this beautiful living area with its also communal balcony space. It has the blue kitchen, which I personally really love. And I have little aprons on the wall and a mixer to show that the Sims who live here really enjoy baking. We have a very simple hallway. We have a bathroom, which is the largest bathroom in the entire building. We have this massive bedroom, which I do imagine going to Harley, and then perhaps a bedroom for her roommate, which you can see why I mean with like cozier vibes with it. I will eventually change many of the swatches within this room because it's a little bit too colorful for Harley, but I still think it looks nice. And then we come upstairs to the penthouse suite, which you can see outside is all about just like calming, skill building activities, which I did end up putting in at the end of this build. We open up into this massive kitchen, which is a very open concept, lots of natural light. There's a half bath as well as a full bath with a shower. The living room, I love this TV and these bookcases that came with the Modern Lux kit. And you can see some hints of both roommates within the communal living spaces. I have the very calm bedroom, and then I have the really fun bedroom that's very bright and colorful. And this balcony isn't decorated just because it belongs to the roommate who pays the most rent, which is not how it actually would, but she hasn't decorated it. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.